Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Thursday, July 14th. I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Here with me today, Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor of The Times, and Times columnist Mark Kiesling, bringing you the latest in political developments. And this one isn't, well, there's some politics to it, but it's really more kind of a societal issue in terms of the Christian Choate case, which we've been writing about for a while. This is the case of the Gary boy who was found dead, buried in concrete, and his father and stepmother have since been arrested and charged with murder. Right,
and he was found, relatively recently, but the actual death was 2 years ago.
Right.
So this is one of those cases where you say there ought to be a law, except there is a law. There ought to be enforcement of the law, perhaps. And the law is, hey, if you suspect abuse or neglect, you report it.
And especially on the part of a doctor. There was evidence here, from my understanding, that a doctor had seen him within the year previous to his death, had written about some of the findings, and did not report this as child abuse.
Yeah, the boy had told the doctor, hey, I don't like being locked in a cage at night, in essence.
Yeah.
And
there were other things, too, and that should have triggered some type of suspicion on the part of any kind of medical professional that all is not well here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are cases where, a kid is just totally fabricating things. But even then, it's probably a good idea to investigate it anyway, just to be safe.
Yeah, an investigation doesn't hurt. In cases like this, it's always better to make a mistake on the side of caution, I think, than it is to make a mistake that was apparently made in this case.
The question, Mark, is do you go on, take that next step, and then prosecute physicians or school officials who fail who have an opportunity to report and fail to do so?
Well, there are recent laws on the books that say you should do just that thing.
Right, but they haven't really been prosecuted.
The head of Indiana's child abuse fatality team, who works with Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, said that she has never seen a case brought against a medical professional for failure to report child abuse. And yet, we know from experience that this type of thing goes on, unfortunately, all too often.
To me, the solution is one of two things. Either you're going to prosecute somebody, and that becomes the example that wakes up the other doctors, or the medical community gets its act together and says, okay, look, enough is enough. We've got to do something about this, or there will be prosecutions. Mm-hmm. And, make it a big deal to promote this in the medical community.
You would like to be able to do this and get the message out there without having to resort to bringing people and putting people behind bars. So.
Right.
The medical community is like a lot of other communities. Policemen, journalists, everyone likes to protect their own, and so that, they've been kind of reluctant thus far to push for prosecution, because sometimes there's a whole there but for the grace of God go I, I could have seen that.
But on the other hand, they have to go through continuing education.
Yes.
And so if you use that opportunity to say, okay, look, we got to solve this problem right now, or else this is going to happen, then maybe the threat of the or else will solve the problem.
Well, it takes someone to grab the bull by the horns. It takes someone to lay down that or else, and that's what I think you're lacking now.
Well, hopefully that leader will emerge.
Hopefully, and sadly, maybe this will be the case that wakes the sleeping giant.
Yeah. Next topic we wanted to tackle is the topic of bridges, and bridges have been in the news a lot lately. both in East Chicago with the Cline Avenue Bridge, and the question over what's going to happen with that. It looked for a while like it was dead. The bridge would not be rebuilt, but there seemed to be signs of life. And also in Gary, we have the Martin Luther King Drive Bridge over the Borman. The state has now announced it's, well, INDOT, the Indiana Department of Transportation, has announced it is suing the construction company that built it, Superior Construction, out of Gary.
Right, and you know, basically in both cases the bridge failed before it, you know, before its life expectancy was over.
And the MLK Bridge was opened in 2004.
Less than 6 years.
Yes, I mean that's
Right.
not a very good life
Yeah.
span for a span. And then you know, you look back at the Cline Avenue Bridge, and it opened in 1986. And you can say, well, you know, gee, that was 25 years ago, but you know, aren't you know, is that all we're building them to last when we spend that kind of money on them?
And that's a lot of money. And that bridge costs more than money. I mean,
Cost
that
lives.
that costs
Yeah.
a lot of
Well, yeah,
lives.
there were 14 people killed in 1982 during the building of that bridge.
That was, you know, at the time, it was the worst industrial accident in the state's history.
It is, as far as I know, it still is. My
So,
understanding is it still is. The worst
Yeah,
industrial.
and,
Well, I
well, the
hope it
question
remains that
is,
way.
you know, INDOT basically kind of surprised everyone and said, "Oh, we're not going to rebuild the bridge," and a lot of the local legislators and other people involved have kind of made their appeal to the governor, saying, "Hey, you know, we can. Ameristar Casino has offered to pay for part of the construction, and we should work something out."
and then, you know, Illinois, the legislature in Illinois passed the gaming expansion bill that would add casinos in Chicago and the south suburbs, which, you know, would potentially have an effect on the Ameristar Casino in East Chicago.
Well, my understanding
So-
from today's paper is that the Ameristar deal to pay the money did not go through for that very reason.
Exactly.
They would not withdrawn. They'd taken that money off the table and said, well, you know, gee, if there's going to be a casino in Navy Pier, there's going to be a casino in the south suburbs. People are talking Fort Heights possibly. I mean, something close by, reasonably close by. That they don't see why they should put $35 million into the construction of the bridge. And we should mention this is not the MLK Bridge is just a span over the expressway. The Cline Avenue Bridge is a major construction project. It goes.
It's in essence, it's its own expressway.
Well, it is. It's Indiana Highway 912, and it goes very far in the air. I mean, it's a difficult engineering project, and it's going to cost a lot of money.
But, you know, the irony in all of this, to me, is the state was planning on replacing that bridge in 2012 anyway. You know, now they've dragged their feet long enough that you know, here we are, 2012 is around the corner, and now they're talking about having traffic go through. Okay, put yourself in the position of somebody coming here from Chicago. You're wanting to gamble your money or for whatever reason, so you take the detour and you're winding through streets that, you know, are you know, have been considered the worst in Lake County for crime. I mean, the route is confusing, winding, twisting. There's a drawbridge in there. I mean, you know, it is just insane.
Well, what it does, just to boil it down, is it makes it very difficult to get to Ameristar or Majestic Star. And if you are coming from Chicago, the first thing you see coming out of the city is the bridge that goes right to the Horseshoe Casino in Hammond. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to get on that bridge and go to Horseshoe, which has been recently completely remodeled, or are you going to duck and weave and go over railroad tracks and double back and get lost? And you know, so not building this bridge would probably essentially kill Ameristar and Majestic Star.
I'd hate to see that.
Well, that's the danger, as I've always written, of a community coming to rely too heavily on casino money. Because I've said all along that money is eventually going to go away, And if Chicago aggressively markets its casino, if the Fort Heights Casino is aggressively marketed, it's not going to take much. Ameristar and Majestic Star are already going to be operating at a disadvantage, and it's not going to take much to get people not to go there.
Well, you know, my take on all of this is that NDOT is its reputation in Northwest Indiana is really suffering for what it's doing to transportation up here.
Real briefly, before we end this, I wanted to touch on the national political controversy of the day, which is the negotiations over raising the debt ceiling, which kind of reached a head and resulted in there's really some hostility between both the president and House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. Kind of ended the meeting yesterday. They're at it today. The president says we need a deal by Friday. Wall Street and Ben Bernanke are starting to squirm and saying, you guys got to get this done. Your take? What's going on there?
You know, I've got to admit that I have not been following that one that closely.
Well, you know, my take on it is that, you know, what's happened is that the rhetoric is ratcheted up. Both sides have become, you know, pretty much intractable, and it's going to take a lot of work to try to bring a compromise out of groups that don't want
the ridiculous thing about it is that this Congress has spent this money. They've budgeted this money. It's kind of like, you know, ordering a meal and then walking out and expecting someone to pay the check. It's ridiculous. So the fact that this has been politicized is just ridiculous in and of itself.
And the thing is, it's not like the debt ceiling hasn't been raised before.
Yeah.
It's been raised many times before.
Yeah, this is the first time that they've turned it into this thing where it has to be married to these cuts. So, I think that they'll reach a deal, but not after a bunch of histrionics.
And I think it's going to come at you know, a great cost, not just financially, but also in terms of the nation's reputation, and also the reputation of the Congress and White House.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with another edition of the Political Roundtable.